All right, so today we're going to be making no knead bread. It's a very simple recipe. You already measured your flour in class. You have the packet of yeast. The only other ingredients you need from home is some salt, 2 teaspoons of salt, and 2 teaspoons of sugar. The recipe calls for 2 teaspoons to 2 1/4 teaspoons of instant yeast. You have 2 teaspoons. If you buy the packets of yeast, that's 2 1/4. So it really doesn't matter. There's some flexibility there. For today, we are going to measure by weight. So I have already put my bowl on the scale. I'm measuring by grams using the metric system. And I tared it out to 0. So I have my flour here. What I love about this method is it's faster and it's just a little bit more accurate than measuring by volume, as you saw in class. So we're going to get 512 grams of flour. At home, sometimes I do a mix of white and wheat flour. Generally speaking, if you want to substitute wheat flour in a recipe that doesn't call for wheat flour, you still want about 2/3 white flour and then about 1/3 wheat flour without changing the recipe too much. So that's actually 513 grams. I'm going to call that close enough. Get the flour out of the way. Then we added 2 teaspoons of salt. 1, 2. Here. 2 teaspoons to 2 1/4 teaspoons of instant yeast. Like I said, if you have a packet of instant yeast, you can just use that. Instant yeast in the store is also called rapid rise. Look how it acts kind of wild and stringy. It's sort of alive. It's actually asleep, so we're going to be waking it up. And what it likes best of all is sugar. It eats the sugar. So we're going to add 2 teaspoons of sugar right in. Now, you want lukewarm water. I have made it with cold water. It's fine. It totally works out. It just takes a little bit longer to get to size. The tip on the recipe to make lukewarm water is to start with 1½ cups of cold. And you want to get it eye level. That is exactly it, 1½ cups. And then you're going to add 2 cups of boiling water. I have some boiling water right here on the kettle. And you're just going to add that in there, measuring it eye level. So you have 2 cups. And for good measure, you're going to want to just mix it up so that the water temperature is dispersed evenly. When we talk about lukewarm water, you really want it to be comfortable. It's about 110, 115 degrees. And you test that by having your finger in there for 10 seconds. It's actually a little on the cool side. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and take this off the scale and mix up all the dry ingredients. You can use a wooden spoon, a metal spoon, a rubber spatula. I don't recommend a whisk because it gets really gunky and sticks inside and it's difficult to clean. We're then going to add the wet ingredients, and you can just dump it in all at once. And we're going to stir until combined. The goal is that all of the dry flour is absorbed. It's kind of a sticky dough, and that's why it's called a no knead bread. It's got more moisture in it than like sandwich bread recipes. So we are just stirring until all of the water and flour is mixed and there's no dry spots. And like I said, one of the reasons that it's nice to measure by weight is because then you know that you have the right amount. You can have a big variation by how densely packed your flour is when you measure with the volume measuring cup. It also doesn't make a lot of dishes, which is always important for me because I don't like washing dishes. So that's it. We're going to... all of the liquid is absorbed, and we're just going to let it sit for about an hour. The sugar is going to feed the yeast along with the flour, and then it just gets bubbly, and it'll basically double in volume. So you just set it in a warm place. I usually set it on the back of my stove, cover it with plastic wrap or a clean towel, and then you're good to go. So we'll check back in an hour. All right, so it's been about an hour, and the bread has a nice rise on it. You can see it's got sort of the air bubbles. That means the yeast is doing its job. It's eating the sugars and producing the gases to allow the bread to rise. So all we're going to do right now, and it's very sticky, so you don't really want to touch it with your hands if you can avoid it. We're just going to turn the dough in on itself. And basically this is called punching it down. If it were more of a kneaded bread, you actually would use your fist and punch it down, but for this case we're just turning it out so that it's doing its first rise. We're going to set this to the side, and we're going to just need an 8x8 pan. It can be glass, it can be ceramic, it just needs to be at the side. It can be even oval shaped. It needs to hold about 2 quarts. So this is an 8x8 pan, it says here on the back. Like I said, it can be any material that you have at home. It just needs, and it doesn't have to be perfectly rectangular. A bread pan isn't great just because of the size of the dough. It doesn't fill the pan quite right, but it would work in a pinch. So we're going to just use our fingers. That's why I'm wearing a glove, and we're going to smush about 1.5 tablespoons to 2 tablespoons of butter. And you really want to put a thick coating of butter on this because it adds a ton of flavor to the bread. So once we get everything coated with the butter, we're going to bring our bread back and simply plop it into the bowl. So then we just kind of gently use the spatula, pull it out to the corners, but it will kind of settle on its own. And then we're going to let it do its second rise. This only needs to be about 30 minutes. And basically what we're looking for is we want the bread to rise to the top of the pan. But while it's doing its rise, we're going to go ahead and set it on the back of the stove. We're going to preheat the oven to 425. We actually cook it under 2 temperatures. The first temperature will be 425 for 15 minutes, and then you do the second. You just turn the oven temperature down to 375, and you do another 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the strength of your oven. So that's it. So it's got a nice rise to it. It's slightly above the pan. We're going to go ahead and put it in the oven. The oven has been preheating this whole time, so it's nice and warm. So we're just going to put it in the middle rack. And we're going to bake at 425 for 15 minutes. Then when that 15 minutes up, you're going to lower the temperature to 375 and bake for another 20 to 30 minutes. That's it. Okay, so it did 15 minutes at 425 and about 20 minutes at 375. So it's ready. Make sure you put on your oven mitts. It will be warm. Then you open it up. You want a nice golden color on top. It should be pretty dark, but that's ready. It's delicious. And then you just need your rack, and you flip it. So here it is. We're going to flip it this way first, and then go ahead and set this aside. Let it cool for about 15 to 20 minutes before you cut it. Otherwise, there's too much heat and it actually doesn't slice well. But when it comes to actually presenting it, you want to present it that way. There you go. Enjoy.